Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
I've written them personal letters. They've been sent or they're going out tonight, but they were written during the weekend. I will, at some point during the period of time, call the parents and the families, because I have done that traditionally. I felt very, very badly about that. I always feel badly. It's the toughest calls I have to make are the calls where this happens. Soldiers are killed.
Yes.
It's a very difficult thing. Now, it gets to a point where, you make 4 or 5 of them in one day. Is a very, very tough day. For me, that's by far the toughest. So the traditional way, if you look at President Obama and other presidents, most of them didn't make calls. A lot of them didn't make calls. I like to call when it's appropriate, when I think I'm able to do it. They have made the ultimate sacrifice. So generally, I would say that I like to call. I'm going to be calling them. I want a little time to pass. I'm going to be calling them. I have, as you know, since I've been president, I have. But in addition, I actually wrote letters individually to the soldiers we're talking about, and they're going to be going out either today or tomorrow. Yes.
He's like a child. He's like a child. Did you send Grandma a thank you note for the $5 she put in your birthday card? Did you write that note? Go write that note. I wrote it. I wrote it last night. I wrote it over the weekend, and I was gonna send. Write the note. Grandma's on a fixed income. Do you think that she sends everybody $5? No, just you, because you're her favorite. I mean, this is so sick, and he makes no sense when he talks about this solemn thing, this horrible thing, this terrible call of duty that presidents have all answered with regard to soldiers that they send into harm's way, that they send into war zones. But you know what? The whole media is having this big debate about because Trump had to make it about me. He had to make it about me. This is what I do. Traditionally, I do this. I did it over the weekend. I was going to send it out today. They were asking him a question. They were asking him a question about what happened to our soldiers in Niger. That's what the question was. What happened to the soldiers in Niger, and why haven't you mentioned them? It's been almost 2 weeks since they died in an ambush attack in West Africa. A, what the hell are we doing there? B, what happened to them? C, we're starting to read that there was no help that came for them. D, is this your Benghazi? Benghazi. And the what difference does it make is going to happen with this guy. But that was the question. The question was, what happened to our soldiers in Niger, and why haven't you talked about it? Now, he could have said, they're Green Berets. It was a secret mission. I cannot discuss this with you because it was so secret, except that Sarah Huckabee Sanders discussed it from the podium, saying our thoughts and prayers are with the families of the 3 dead soldiers. Turned out there were 4. One was left there. One was left behind and was only discovered by the French 48 hours after he died. He was left there. And by the way, no help came for our guys. No help. No American helicopters, no American planes, no American medics, no doctors, no nothing. No nothing. So much for the golden rule. Battlefield injuries are seen to within an hour. So much for that. Here's what happened to our soldiers in Niger before I continue on with this insanity and show you what a front-running... Listen, he's a liar. I just showed you he's a liar. Obamacare doesn't exist. And, today they said, you know what? You took away the payments. We're putting them back. Bye-bye. And we're adding $100 million to it, too, because we want to do the outreach, because it starts in, a few days, and people need to know, because we want young people to enroll, and we want people to continue their insurance coverage, et cetera, et cetera. So we know he lies about that. But this this is disgusting, okay? Because this isn't political. When soldiers die, they don't have a political affiliation. They're dead. When soldiers join, typically they don't have a political affiliation. But I'm just saying, okay, so, this is amazing. This is what happened to our soldiers. This is a really, really gross story. And for all you Benghazi suckers out there, this ought to be like on the top of your list. But it won't be. You know why? Because you're partisan. It won't be important to you. You know why? Because you love this son of a bitch. You love this madman. You love this insane excuse for a human that is trying to pretend that he's presidential. This man is totally pathological. He cannot tell the truth. If you tortured him, maybe he would tell the truth. And that's only because torture usually produces lies. So maybe it would have the opposite effect. I'm just saying. Okay, so there has been no discussion about these soldiers, and I just wanted to tell you what happened to them, okay? It happened on October 4th. It happened in West Africa in a country called Niger. They were 4 Green Berets, and they were killed by an ISIS-affiliated fighter attack. It was an ambush. It was an absolute ambush. Here is what the officials are saying. They said that it was a 12-man Green Beret-led team that just completed a meeting with the local leaders. They were walking back to their unarmored pickup trucks, just pickup trucks. And there was this unexpected ambush, and a firefight broke out, just like Benghazi. It lasted about a half an hour, and no one came to help them. There was no American air cover. There was no American nothing. So the commanders started phoning the French and said, please, can you help? The French Mirage jets arrived. And they started flying low, very low passes, trying to disperse this ambush, these attackers, right? So here's what the attackers had: rocket-propelled grenades. The attackers had machine guns. The U.S. troops were armed only with rifles. They were in just pickup trucks, unarmored trucks. And the officials in the theater said that this area had been considered unlikely to run into opposition. But now we're finding out that some locals in the area actually knew that an attack was being planned. This is according to 2 officials who are speaking to Barbara Starr, from the Pentagon reporter from CNN. The failure to anticipate an attack and the fact that there were no U.S. rescue and no U.S. recovery assets close by meant nearly an hour went by before the evacuation of the 2 wounded and 3 dead by French Super Puma helicopters. So the wounded and the dead were rescued by the French in their Puma helicopters. You can jump higher in a Puma. You can run faster in a Puma. And the Mirage attackers, they flew really low to try and disperse the crowd. And then finally an hour goes by and they could send in helicopters to pick up the 2 wounded and the 3 dead. Yes, there were 4 that were killed. The French helicopters were able to get the team to safety, but there was a critical failure to find a soldier named Johnson for another 48 hours, and that has not been explained. His body was eventually found in a nearby area, but military investigators do not know why he was left behind. All they know is there was a French-led evacuation, and if he was alive, even for a short period of time, we don't know, because he was left behind. So the officials who have read the initial after-action reports say there was confusion and uncertainty on the ground after what was a completely unexpected attack. And the team was particularly vulnerable because it was in 2 separate locations when the attack began. So they were divided, these 12. It's like 6 over here and 6 over there, because some of them were walking back from a meeting with the locals, and the others were waiting outside guarding the vehicles that the U.S. troops were using. So that's the official explanation that was given to Barbara Starr over at CNN. Now, these bodies were returned, and they were brought back to Dover in that ceremony that you've seen. You know, when a soldier dies, they're not supposed to ever be alone. They're supposed to be somebody with them at all times, with their body, to see them all the way home. And the president, even though the amount of people who have been killed under George W. Bush, huge, under Barack Obama, hundreds, and under Donald Trump, like tens. Not saying that every death doesn't count. That's not the point. The point is he could have gone to Dover. He did not go. The president of the United States, Donald Trump, did not go to Dover. He was golfing. Again. Him and that giant ass that sits beside him. We ought to name that ass. It's like a whole other person. That and the belly. I mean, it's like, looking at three different people. It's unbelievable. Anyway, here's the New York Times report. When a team of Green Berets in unarmored pickup trucks came under fire in Niger last week, they quickly found themselves in the middle of a nightmare battlefield scenario, outgunned, taking casualties, and far from friendly support. The operation that left 4 American soldiers dead and 2 wounded is now under investigation, Pentagon officials say. That inquiry, senior military officials said, will likely reveal that the American troops had deployed to a hostile area without adequately assessing the risk and lacked ready access to medical support. No medical support. Battlefield commanders have called medical aid an ethical obligation. Healthcare in the field, ethical obligation. The Defense Department follows a golden hour standard. Told you. This is a term in which the military actually seeks to whisk wounded American troops from the battlefield within an hour of being wounded, to give them access to the most advanced care and the best chance to save their lives. This is why, Obama always went to, Michelle Obama too. Her thing was, eating healthy and veterans stuff, right? Everything to do. They would have Gold Star family breakfast. They'd have Gold Star family lunches. They went to Dover, Delaware. They greeted the bodies from Benghazi. Okay. They were all there in that solemn ceremony. I mean, the idea that, Obama used to go to Walter Reed, and he would spend 3-4 hours a day in Walter Reed trying to, just visit with them and, joke with them and tell them, read the room and decide whether or not these guys wanted to, complain about, whatever, or whether they wanted to be cheered up. I mean, he would know what to do. He always knew, because he's got class and judgment and character. And Michelle Obama, same thing, would go to Walter Reed and visit the... Okay, so that all said, in Africa, the time frame for evacuating injured American troops is much longer. And particularly in West Africa, military officials acknowledged this week. The team of roughly a dozen Army Special Forces in Niger were on what officials said was a routine reconnaissance mission when they were ambushed and no American helicopters came. The French military, based about 275 miles away in neighboring Burkina Faso, the French like to colonize, scrambled to help, eventually rescuing the casualties and providing attack support. The lack of help called into question whether the American military is providing enough resources for troops undertaking dangerous missions in Africa. The vast remote stretches in which American special forces operate are inherently dangerous because of their inaccessibility and are conducive to ambushes, said Brigadier General Donald Baldock, who until June commanded Special Operations Forces on the continent of Africa. Quote, he said, "It's not the end of the earth, but you can see it from there. It's tough, tough stuff to operate in." The military's Africa Command, this general, who isn't in charge of it anymore, hasn't been since June, July, August. I mean, he's been gone 3 months and this happened, right? The military's Africa Command asked lawmakers for help months before the attack in Niger, which This is about twice the size of Texas. Okay, it's in West Africa. Go get a map. Quote, Africa lacks a theater distribution network to support our forces. This is their statement to the Senate Armed Services Committee. This is John McCain is the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. And they said this in March. They said they have 1,000 troops operating across a 9-nation region of West Africa. And, quote, this capability gap forces our personnel to revert to costly and ineffective ad hoc solutions. Turns out the soldiers who are deployed to these far-flung regions, knowing that there's no medical help in the field, that there are no American helicopters coming, that there are no American fighters nearby to help them if they're ambushed. Benghazi, Libya, that's North Africa, okay? It's North Africa. This is West Africa. So we ought to have learned our lesson. And apparently we did until we relieved this general. And, Trump knows more than the general. So check this out. The American commandos that are deployed to this region, they joke that their command's inability to get them harm's way has boiled down to one directive. Don't get hurt. A Special Operations Forces member who had deployed to Central Africa recently and oversaw planning for medical evacuation procedures for his unit said if anyone on his team was wounded, they could ideally count on being evacuated in 10 hours. General Bolduc said 10 hours was wishful thinking. He said, we're in such remote locations that they fall well outside even that expanded time frame for emergency medical evacuation, calling the military's evacuation capabilities immature. Oh, that sounds like the president, doesn't it? He said, you're never going to have the golden hour in Africa. It's not possible. But you have an acceptable amount of time that we've agreed on. It's his Benghazi. RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.